Okay, we're going to return back into our meeting for the Board of Governors for the California Community Colleges. We should have a short meeting from this point forward. Member Baum has asked to give his board member report just a little bit early. He'll have to leave a little bit earlier and then the meeting ends.
Thank you,
Member
Madam.
Baum.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciate that. And all I wanted to do was call attention to an invitation that I placed at each of my colleagues' places. Tomorrow night, we will be inaugurating a new president, superintendent president at Pasadena City College, and we're honored that the chancellor will be coming down to Pasadena for that gathering. And I just wanted to make sure the board members knew they were all welcome to attend, and I will be the master of ceremonies. We'll be sure to boast quite proudly of the accomplishments of the Board of Governors when we're at that event. So thank you for allowing me to make that announcement.
Absolutely. Do good work. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 6.3, the Task Force on Student Success. Chancellor Scott.
Well, there is a trite saying, but I'll use it. It says that when you get a lemon, make of it a lemonade. We had a bill, Senate Bill 1143, that in its original form, a lot of us had a lot of concern about. In fact, when it came up in front of the Senate, almost every segment of the community colleges opposed it. And I want to explain that a little bit, why it was opposed, and not because it didn't have a good intent, but we felt the solution to student success in community colleges would have some unintended consequences. And all that bill did was it said that there would be 2 censuses. Right now we have a 4th week census, and our funding is based on that, and that there would be a 2nd census at course completion. The implication, at least what we were fearful of, is that we would simply average those 2 censuses, and if we did that, our funding would drop by 8%. So obviously that wasn't something that we were excited about. Plus, course completion is not the only thing that has to do with student success. We were fearful that some colleges that are located in, say, very poor economic areas naturally probably don't have as high a rate of course completion as some of the colleges that are located in a richer suburban area. So we didn't want to penalize those colleges because of that. There might also be the problem that on occasions the courses that we would want to offer would be offered on the basis of the ones that had the highest completion rate rather than the basis of the curriculum. So a lot of us expressed concern about that, and it came before the Senate and it was unable to get out. So I received a call that night from a fellow senator and said, would you work with the author and maybe we could take this bill and amend it and get it to be a bill that in general we would believe in. So I was quite willing to take the challenge, and quite a few others involved as well. And we decided that there would be a bill that would authorize the Board of Governors to create a task force to work on student success. Now, student success in California community colleges and in community colleges throughout the nation is one of the top subjects. We all know that because we deal with the most vulnerable population, we're an open access institution, that it's more difficult frequently in dealing with these students to reach course completion. As I sometimes would point out, the freshman class at Harvard is going to have a little higher completion rate than the freshman class at, say, Sacramento City College. Not because Sacramento City College teachers are doing a poor job, but because they're dealing with a more vulnerable population, many of whom are working full-time, many of whom maybe didn't do so well in high school. You know, you could give all kinds of reasons for that. And many who come to community colleges, frankly, not because they're planning to transfer, but maybe because they want to take a particular course. So, but we know that we would like to work on student success. And some of the factors we can't control. We know that we're dealing with a very difficult budget. And for instance, several times in our meeting here the last day or two, we've talked about the need for increased counseling, the value of programs like EOPS, and so forth that contribute to student success. But all of these programs have been cut, and cut rather severely. So we're struggling. But that doesn't mean we can't look at student success and look at ways in which we might improve student success. And there are all kinds of, what would be some of the issues? Well, could we have better assessment? In other words, when the student comes in. We had a conversation yesterday about prerequisites. Could prerequisites improve student success? That's a good question to be raised, and I thought a rather strong case was made yesterday that yes, it could. We could look at basic skills. Are we dealing with the students who need remedial courses as well as we should? And there are some models throughout our state that we're looking at pretty closely now. Cabrillo College, for instance, has had a cohort that has a cohort approach, a learning community approach that has rather dramatically improved student success at that college. So there are a lot of issues. How can we improve student success, and what would be the measures of proving student success? Should we have more associate degrees that we grant? Should we have a greater rate of transfer? Should we have a better course completion? Should our students who go through basic skills, should we be more effective in terms of getting them to the level of entry-level English and math in a better way? Those are very important questions and ones that we would want to look at. But rather than coming up with the solution, the first thing we need to do is to do a study. So this bill, Senate Bill 1143, has gone through the legislature, and we're very hopeful the governor will sign it. Now, some have asked the question, well, couldn't the Board of Governors have a task force and go ahead with a task force on student success, whether there's a legislative bill or not? And the answer to that is yes. And if, for instance, the governor were to veto this bill, it might be we'd want to go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with our doing that. It's just that if we had this kind of legislative imprimatur, it would make it even more effective, I think, and it would be called to the attention. So, frankly, I'm excited about the idea of a task force on student success. And I did suggest that it be in the hands of the Board of Governors. Now, you might ask why. I think, number one, this is a group that is been appointed because of your interest in community colleges. This is a very knowledgeable group. The bill does call for us on March 1st, 2012, to come up with a report that would be approved by the Board of Governors and would be brought to the legislature. So the legislature will get to hear the report, but we honestly thought it was wiser for the Board of Governors to be involved. Now, that doesn't mean that the task force would be made up strictly of people that are in community colleges, because I think for this report to have meaning, it's got to not only have credibility among us, but it's got to have credibility on the outside. And it's interesting, there were two sources of opposition to this bill. And one who said, wait a minute, we're doing the best we can, and maybe they were fearful that maybe some of these recommendations might get into funding and so forth, and so let's just don't do anything. The other one said, wait a minute, this is just going to be a report that's going to gather dust on a shelf, and this is not strong enough. So we feel like this can be a strong task force, and I think it's a very exciting thing. And I think if we pick some good people, and by the way, you might ask the question, where's the funding for this? Well, we don't have any funding from the state. But we have already put out some feelers to foundations, and we believe that we can get foundation funding to carry on the task force because, you know, the task force, if it's going to be a good one, it's got to it's got to have input, so there ought to be some town hall meetings, maybe throughout the state. It's got to go look at some models, or else bring the models in. And we really ought to have somebody as a full-time coordinator of this, because this is not, you know, I don't, you know, I personally don't want to take on the job of being full-time coordinator for a task force and try to do everything else I try to do. So anyway, so I think we've got, we were fortunate when Henry Ramos and Kerry Wood and I, we went to both the Irvine Foundation and to the Packard Foundation, and they've expressed an interest in this. And since then, we've made contacts with the Gates Foundation and the Lumina Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation. So we're going to try to explore this. Obviously, before I went much further, we needed to talk this over with the Board of Governors, since you're going to be involved in it. And I don't intend to have a recommendation today. I would maybe try to give a recommendation to you at the November meeting, because by that time we will know whether the bill has been signed or not and what it is you want to do about it. I would feel like that there ought to be one representative from the task force, from the Board of Governors to this task force. I'm talking to you kind of in general terms, but I wanted to introduce the subject today and go into some detail and talk about the vision of what this is. And you might say, well, what will this do after a year? Well, we would hope that it would have some recommendations, some means of implementation, whether those recommendations involve legislation, whether they involve changes of programs, recommendations for legislation, but also recommendations to the colleges themselves. And I think student success, and when I first came into this job, I thought, what is one of the top topics that's going on in community college today? And immediately came to my mind the idea that the whole matter of student success, as thorny and as difficult as it might be, is probably one of the top topics. So I wanted to introduce this subject this morning. I wanted to get all your input on it, and within perhaps 2 months from now, have a recommendation to the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing all those thoughts. Vice President Himmelstein.
Chancellor, first of all, let me commend you on your lemonade making. I really think you have turned this into a very, very positive question. When you come back to us with recommendations, do recommendations include suggestions for method of appointment to the task force, number of members, or is it going to be more focused on criteria, topics, outcomes type of thing, or all inclusive?
Well, I honestly would hope that we could come to you with the recommendations of the composition of the task force. And as I said, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't think that this is not, okay, let me tell you some of the things I don't think ought to be the task force. I don't think it ought to be exclusively community college people, because I think for it to have credibility, there ought to be some people on the task force that know something about community colleges, but can also have a perspective other than an internal perspective. Although I think a majority of the task force would probably be internal. Secondly, I don't think it necessarily ought to be just a rainbow kind of committee. By that, you know, we're going to have one of this and one of that and one of this and one of that. I think it ought to be a task force that is appointed on the basis of those who can make the best contribution. And so I would hope that we don't just get into a business of saying, well, we've got to have one of, a kind of a rainbow committee, because I don't think that'll necessarily be the most effective task force. So I do feel that there ought to be one member of the task force from the Board of Governors, because you're the one that are going to eventually called upon to approve the task force and called upon to approve the recommendations of the task force. And there'll be reports on a regular basis. If this is a year, if this will take about a year, there will be reports on a regular basis as to the progress of the task force.
Any other questions or comments? No? Member McDougall?
I also would like to commend the chancellor. I don't think there is an issue that is of greater importance to community colleges than this particular issue. I think in many ways, as much effort has been put behind trying to develop models for success, we still have a long way to go as a system. But to confront it, to move ahead on it, I think is a real example of leadership. And I commend you, Chancellor Scott, for that. Second, I would heartily endorse that a person needs to be full-time to coordinate and pull this together. I would hope an individual who knows the colleges well, has exemplified leadership in this area and has exemplified commitments, but has demonstrated the capability of getting a product produced in the end. Third, I think it would be helpful when we next consider this issue, I would assume at our next meeting, that we have specifics as to what the composition might be and some alternatives to that. Because I concur, we're not after a political committee. We're after a committee where the members share a commitment to the content of what this project represents. And that is what is most important. Obviously, we would need very, very strong faculty participation and others. And I think it would also be helpful to have a sense of what the budget might be, maybe different minimum budget that we think would be adequate and help us to a greater extent, but 2 or 3 levels of a budget that we could look at.
Good point. Member Baum and then Member Price.
I just had a question. First off, thank you for taking the leadership and with Vice Chancellor Garcia and you to transform this legislation, because last we heard about it, it was that there's a bill with problems coming up and that we had a lot of concerns about it. And traditionally, just procedurally, I don't know that we could take action now, but we as a board tend to endorse a direction or positions on legislation, and we haven't necessarily done that yet, but we want to kind of express our support for the direction this is going. Is that even possible? Is it helpful or possible for us to, as a board, take a position on legislation? We've taken positions on other pieces of legislation that are brought to us for review and discussion.
Do you want to speak to that, Vice Chancellor Garcia?
The way the process is set up is the chancellor has endorsed this legislation and sent a letter to the governor, and that always starts with on behalf of the Board of Governors.
That's
so you
right.
have formally
Oh, that's
taken a
right. And we
position.
actually, as a board, had delegated to the chancellor to take
Exactly.
positions rather than the board take. That's right. That was
So
the
all the
confusion.
correspondence
I remember we
represents
made
your.
that policy change. Right. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Price?
I really like the idea of this task force, and you guys talked about who should be on the board and not making it a rainbow committee, but I really am concerned that the student perspective not be overlooked, because a lot of the time, especially with basic skills, if you really get down to those students, they can give you a lot of insight on things that would really help to further their success in these classes. So I would really like to see at least some student perspective on this task force.
Thank you, very good thought. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for this report. We'll look forward to the next one. We're up to board member reports, item 6.4. I'm going to start with Board Member Reed.
I'm going to take this opportunity to speak to you about my role as a board member on the foundation. I've been very pleased to see that the foundation's been expanded. Not only have Henry and I been appointed, but as you recall, we had 2 other individuals appointed, and I think a 9-member board is a much stronger board than the 5-member board that preceded it. As a subset, one of the things that I'm particularly pleased with and had some concern initially and had spoken to our chancellor about the administration of the funds relative to the Osher Foundation as well as WellPoint. And through Paul Lanning's decision-making, we've set up a subcommittee of investment committee where the funds have been turned over to J.P. Morgan in San Francisco and set out some very restrictive guidelines as to how those monies should be invested with the goal of earning a nice return, if you will, to continue funding this endowment program of the Osher as well as WellPoint. And I'm particularly pleased with that because I had, as a board member, been concerned initially with the direction that we were going in handling these funds, how they would be invested, and what returns we might expect to get in the future. So with that, I wanted to make that kind of as a board report this morning. And also, I've had the opportunity with my local community college to attend a back-to-school day with the faculty. We spoke to the faculty about the role of our foundation, and quite surprisingly, I think there's a lot of faculty members in these small schools, I can't speak for the larger schools, they're just unaware of some of the work that this foundation does, this Board of Governors does. And I think it's important that we get out into those colleges in our communities and let them know of the good work that's being done on their behalf. So, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Thomas?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First, in early August, I attended CSEA's Community College Symposium right here in Sacramento and joined nearly 100 community college classified employees from all over California. And we had the opportunity to hear Vice Chancellor Eric Skinner and Reed Milbourne and also Joshua Golka discuss the state budget situation, kind of an update of where things were in early August, talk about advocacy efforts, and also then to talk about the importance of students and constituent groups working together in the areas of advocacy. So it was very well presented, lasted a couple of hours, I believe, and there were some really great questions, and members of the classified staff who attended definitely appreciated the opportunity to hear from folks that are involved at the Capitol or were involved at the Capitol at that time, and asked some very good questions about what kinds of things that they could do to help support the effort. So that was really great. The other thing I wanted to share with the board, and in CSEA's Focus magazine, there was most recently a 2-page article and a sort of a spread, and that featured the California Community College Board of Governors honoring this year's community college classified employees. So I wanted to share that with board members. We took a nice group picture. It looked really great. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and it certainly ties in very well with Chancellor Scott's comments on SB 1143, and that's the work that on the Commission on the Future, the League's Commission on the Future, that I've been serving on behalf of the board. And the work is nearing an end on the Commission on the Future, which with the goal to also produce a report. And the final report, the 2020 Vision Student Success, is due to be distributed in either late October or early November. It sounds very similar to what Chancellor Scott outlined as provisions that are in 1143, so hopefully that document will be out in time to be used by the task force that you're talking about, at least as a tool to work towards that. The League will be conducting informational workshops in at least 6 areas throughout the state between September 15th, the first one is actually tomorrow, and October 14th. The intent of these workshops is to provide community college leaders with an overview of the goals laid out by the report and an opportunity to have input before the report is finalized if there are some areas that need to be added to or worked on. The report themes include leadership and accountability, teaching and learning, integrated student support, finance, and affordability. So I've updated the board as we've progressed through that, but I just wanted to give board members an opportunity to know that there are informational workshops out there. If you're interested, there may be one in the area near you. If you check the League's website, I'm sure that you can find dates and locations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will. Board Member Baca.
Provided a reporter here, so I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Board Member McDougall. Board Member Izumi.
Just one thing, in October, I will be moderating a panel sponsored by the U.S. Army at Mount San Antonio College on the issue of counseling. And so I think that will be a very interesting panel, and I'll make a report on that at our next meeting.
Great. Member Ramos.
Thank you. Well, since our last meeting, I have been formally invited to serve on the foundation board for Cuesta College, which is the closest local community college in my place of residence, and I've happily accepted that invitation. I've also been active on the foundation board for the system, along with Gary Reed, and I want to commend Gary. I think he understated his contributions to the work that's being done there. And I had an opportunity yesterday to have a very, very informative meeting with members of the student leadership of the system about some of their opportunities and some of their needs. And they commended Vice Chancellor Michalowski for her support in hard budget times. My great hope is that somehow working with Vice Chancellor Michalowski and the foundation leadership and other private supporters that we might be able to augment the support that we provide to those students for the important work that they do. Frankly and disturbingly, I guess most honestly, I would report that I've been fighting for my life to stay on this board. Clearly, there are some political issues that the Chancellor alluded to in his opening report yesterday that we hope we can overcome, and I remain cautious but optimistic that we can do that. But in that connection, I really want to thank the Chancellor for his support. I want to thank, in particular, Vice Chancellor Garcia for her guidance through this process and her legwork on my behalf. And also, very importantly, I really want to thank the members of this board who have strong ties to Republican leadership in the Senate, whose support I will need if I'm to be accepted as a full-time member of this body. And you've been generous in your help and in your guidance. And I'm going to say a good Catholic prayer over the next couple of weeks and hope for the best case outcome. So thank you very much, one and all.
Thank you. We will be working very hard for you. Thank you for all you've done for us. Thank you. Vice President Himmelstein?
Yeah, no report other than really to say thank you to the Chancellor and staff for arranging for us to be at the Capitol for this meeting. I think the change of venue was great, and although they're not in session, we were, as said, on the squawk boxes and on the California channel. It does provide some different visibility. In general, I think it's just good to shake it up every once in a while. So I thank you, Chancellor, for working with the Secretary of the Senate and staff as well.
Thank you. I'm going to give a few other reports that I didn't mention earlier. In the past few months, I have met with Jane Patton from the Academic Senate talking about the prerequisites. I also wanted to mention that our board did have dinner with the League's CCCT board this past Sunday night at Kay Albiani's house as an effort for us to work together and meet each other. I also want the board to know that I did reach out to the Board of Education President Ted Mitchell. I have not heard back from him yet, and to talk about where we go after our joint meeting last time. And also, I did request from the board any thoughts or comments. I got 2 back, so if you have any thoughts or comments about how our 2 boards could work together, please feel free to email me, because we're going to be working on that, and I'll report back to you next time. I also wanted to let people know, thank you to Bobby McDonald, that at the League Conference in November, they did put on the schedule, Meet the Board of Governors. So that is Friday night, November 19th, from 7 to 9 p.m. I would love all the board members to be there. I know I will be there. And I'm working with Vice Chancellor Carbaugh to find out what's involved and how it will work. So we're going to try and make it as nice as possible. And thank you again for mentioning that. So hopefully we'll have a presence at all their conferences, but that's a large one. So again, Friday night, November 19th, 7 to 9 p.m. I envision it that we will be there and people will come by, and it should be very nice. That ends my report. Board Member Baum.
I will pass, other than come to Pasadena, we'd love to host you for that conference.
Board Member Haley.
I'll pass.
Board Member Davis Lyman.
Yes, it's not often you get to be in the in our wonderful chancellor's wake, but being caught up in it, I arrived the day after 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday at Cuyamaca campus after he had had a successful gathering on that Thursday. And I want to say 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday, greeted warmly by Jennifer Lewis, who's a grant manager there in the parking lot while asking for directions. I was not there officially as a Board of Governors member, but I was there with 2 young women that are important to me in my life. But what happened was absolutely what happens on a lot of our campuses. Beautiful campus with many strong programs. I was warmly received by Henry Magala, who's their Executive Dean of Institutional Advancement, Darlene Spohr, who is the Dean of Instruction for CTE and Workforce Training, and Barbara Takahashi, who's the Administrative Assistant in the Office of the President. And I think it's just one more example of what can happen at our colleges, even when they don't even know you and don't know that you're coming, because I was there for something very unofficial. And so I want to thank them very much for continuing that wonderful community college spirit. Also, as part of my trip to Southern California, I had the chance to meet Amanda in Los Olivos. And Amanda's story was very compelling to me. It's one we've heard before. But she goes to 2 different colleges, community colleges, in kind of the Central Coast area. And I know this is something we're working on, and it's something we've got to continue to work on, because we can't have this kind of thing continue to happen to our students. She has to drive 40 minutes extra, 4 days a week, because she attends 2 community colleges. One of the colleges will not accept the college transfer course as the math exit course from the college where she wants to graduate and where the program is. And she's taken concurrently classes at both of the colleges. And I have had the opportunity to speak to Jane Patton, the president of the Academic Senate, about this. And I know something is happening in this area, but I just wanted to bring it up again. One of our students has to travel 40 minutes a day extra because one of our colleges will not accept the other colleges' college algebra for their exit test. And I'm glad we're working on this. The sooner, the better for our students. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning it. Board Member Price.
Well, a couple months ago, at our last board meeting, I was interviewed by Affinity Magazine, and I was told that it's going to be coming out, so I'm really excited to see how that interview turned out. I attended the Student Senate meeting this month. They're still working on gathering applications to forward to the governor for the second seat on the Board of Governors. That deadline is September 22nd for applications. Paul Lanning from the foundation showed up at their meeting to give a nice presentation. It was really nice to see him on a weekend going and talking to the students. The last thing, the Student Senate's Fall General Assembly will be in San Diego this year. It'll be at the end of October during Halloween weekend. And their theme for this year is retaining access, ensuring success. So I hope that I will be able to attend, and maybe some of you would also like to attend. And that's it.
Can you email us the information for that conference? Thank you. Board Member McDonald?
I think I'm on. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be speaking at a couple events. I'm going to be speaking at the Region 8 Veterans event that's coming up. And I'm also going to be speaking at the Student Senate Retreat that's coming up at Coast Community, in the Coast Community College District. I will also be speaking here real shortly at the Employment Development Department's Hire a Vet, Honor a Hero, Hire a Vet program coming up. That's also a part of Vice Chancellor Jose Millon's shop with Workforce Development and our outreach program. And I've done a couple of those already. And again, it's really, really nice to let the people know and the veterans know that they have opportunities at the community colleges. And it's a nice hookup with us with the EDD department. And that'll be coming up. I do want to make a statement that we're getting ready to go to Compton College in El Camino here real shortly. I know that we are responsible as a board for Compton College, and I think that we might want to be able to get some information on where we stand with that before we go to the meeting. Okay, maybe a couple weeks out, not just with the agenda, but because I know that we'll probably be asked a bunch of questions when we get down there. Okay. The other thing I want to share with the group is a couple other items, and I'll be finished here. I kind of concur with my twin brother over there, Peter McDougall, about getting the info about the community colleges and the report from Patrick Perry to the chancellor, and ask him to get with the two candidates, seeing how he has our voting and rights. And our support on that to help out, because I think anything we can do to help us down the road, both those candidates should know about what we need and the support we need. I do want to let you also know that on the 23rd of September, the Black Chamber of Commerce of Orange County will have its annual reception or banquet, and we'll be honoring that evening Chancellor Ned Dauphiney from North Orange County Community College and Chancellor Ding Joe Curry from Coast Community College District at that banquet. So just wanted to get that, keep the community colleges alive and well in Orange County and Southern California. And final note, thank you very kindly, Madam Chair, for having that reception on the 9th or 10th, the 7th, from 7 to 9 on the 19th at the league. I'm glad, because we had talked about that before in March, and I'm glad that you remembered that. And I want to make sure that everybody goes to bed early so they can be available at 8:30 in the morning to come hear that veterans panel that's going to be on right there at the convention. So thank you.
Sounds great. And I've asked the chancellor to send us some notes about Compton Education Center. Chancellor Scott.
Well, I did make a report yesterday, but I would like to add to that report if you will indulge me. I'm glad that, for instance, Tana Thomas talked about the Commission on the Future. Certainly, the task force that we're envisioning for 2011 will build upon work that's already done. There's an old expression, there's no need of reinventing the wheel. And one of the things that, whether it's the Commission on the Future or some of the other great work that has already been done in community colleges on this whole issue of student success, it will be used by the task force, not only what's been done in California, but of course what's been done nationwide, because there's a lot of work. We have a movement called Achieving the Dream, for instance, that's nationwide in nature, and so we'll be building on that. I did, and I'm glad that Henry Ramos talked about the confirmation. We'll be working on that. We've gotten some clues that maybe that log jam over in the that's here in the Senate will be broken. I want to reemphasize what I said earlier yesterday, that both Henry Ramos and Peter McDougal were considered sterling candidates, and there was never any objection to their qualifications. They just happened to get caught up in some push and shove on the part of the two political parties. And, you know, as someone who spent 12 years in this building, I'm familiar with that sort of thing. And I can't always explain it, other than it's just a partisan struggle that does break out on occasions. And I've even seen struggles break out between the Assembly and the Senate, you know, where the one of them will hold up bills because they thought the other one held up bills, and suddenly bills die, not because of the quality of the bills, but because of the intramural battle between two houses. You know, I guess we sometimes are a little bit reminded of the great quote of Winston Churchill when he said, "Democracy is the worst system of government in the world, except it just happens to be better than any other system." So sometime when we see what happens in our democracy, we get a little discouraged, but we've got to keep going. I mentioned last time, and I'll reiterate the fact, that my wife and I will be traveling to China in October 12th through 19th at the invitation of Chinese government officials to talk with them about community colleges and the value of community colleges. And of course, I like to be a salesperson for community colleges, whether it's in California or in China, and we'll be in Shanghai during that time. Next week, I will be speaking at two occasions. One is a Hispanic conference that's being held in San Diego on Monday of next week, and it's a national Hispanic group in which the discussion will be about how community colleges can best serve Latino students. And then the next morning I will speak at the Jonathan Club in Los Angeles to also about the, you know, what the community colleges do for California. This is a organization, business and professional people in Los Angeles. So sorry that I didn't include all that, but it just came to my mind, and I wanted to respond a little bit too on this Commission on the Future, which I think has done some superb work. And we're going to be looking everywhere for ideas in terms of ways in which student success in California community colleges can be achieved.
Thank you very much. We are now on to the public forum part of our agenda.
We have one speaker, Jane Patton from the Academic Senate.
Good morning again. I'll make this very brief, but I wanted to be sure to extend an early invitation to all of you to our fall plenary session, which will be in Anaheim this year, November 11th and 12th. And you will all get an invitation, but those of you in Southern California particularly, even if you can come by for lunch, maybe attend one breakout, the topics are very lively and the kinds of things that I think you would find very interesting. I also want to let you know that of our many events that we do during the year, we've decided to put on a special basic skills conference for faculty. And it's a first ever one. We're doing it in February in San Jose. And as you know, we've always done workshops on accreditation and occupational issues. We put on 8 or 10 events during the year that are pretty major. And I know that yesterday Jonathan Lightman made a comment about faculty development. The Academic Senate is one of the major providers of faculty development in the state, and I'm very proud of the work we do to reach out to our peers. So if you can come to our plenary, we'd love to have you come. Thanks.
So,
Thank you very much. I just want to finish with a thank you to the Chancellor, Greg Schmidt, Adrian back there for making our meeting in the Capitol excellent. We've had a great time, and we really appreciate all the work. And Jerry, of course. Big. It did take a bit of effort, and it was a shakeup, so they all did a great job. And our next meeting is an away meeting. We're at the El Camino campus. I'm still working, talking about where we're staying. The state budget holds it up a little bit also, so we're working on that, but we'll look forward to it. Was there one more comment? Member McDougall?
Madam Chair, your comment about the State Board of Education reminded me that the State Board of Education recently adopted the national standards. That is a major move. The implication of that is very significant, and I do think it provides an added impetus for us as a board to work with them. The outcomes specifically are that graduates will be college and career ready when they graduate from high school. That obviously connects to the community colleges so very directly. I think it's fortuitous that we already had a gathering and I think established some good relationships. But if anything, this action by the state board provides an impetus for us to work very closely together, and I think it can be obviously very helpful to the students who are in our system and who will be coming to the community colleges.
Thank you very much. That's a good thought to end our meeting on. This meeting is adjourned.